Hey, I'll intro. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Product Analytics Weekly. I'll kick us off by sharing my screen and walking through the billboard. Can everyone see?
Yep.
Yeah, well, see what I'm sharing. Let's walk through the board. First up in workflow design, we have Rob, your instrumentation screens onboarding flow. This is still ongoing, but anything you would like to add to this?
Yeah, we're just coming back from being away for a few days. We were discussing the back-end related aspects of making this all tick. I need to get back into those conversations and see where they're at and then go on from there. But the designs are basically nearly all signed off, and they're most of them have been weighted and have an implementation plan ready to start getting scheduled.
Awesome. Then we also have onboarding and Jitsu Q2 project GraphQL type. I believe this is also one of your issues.
Yeah, which is probably going to be adjusted or changed or adapted based upon the backend conversation we're having. But essentially, we're going to need some way of being able to get that Jitsu key to the front end to be rendered. I have not spoken to Max or anyone else about this just yet. Dealing with the other backend things first.
Cool. Would you mind if I assign this to you as DRI?
Sure.
Awesome. Then we also have a blocked issue for track usage on the internal handbook. I believe this is blocked by infrastructure.
Yeah, so if you want to just jump quickly to review, in review and on my issue. I've published the initial draft, not published, I've posted the initial draft for the production readiness review for infrastructure and security to review. That's, yeah, linked somewhere. Yeah, there it is. It's touching on 4,000 words. So if you want to read it, please, by all means, I'd appreciate your feedback or any corrections to the information there. But I think it's a good first iteration for us to at least get the instrumentation on the internal handbook going, given that it's a internal only feature, endeavor. So I've already pinged the necessary parties to review and give feedback on that, or if they need other people to review for them. But hopefully we should be able to get instrumentation on the internal handbook soon.
Cool. Thanks for that update. Yeah, 400 lines. You weren't lying.
Yeah.
The next ready for development issue is assigned to Axel, but I believe this is actually in development because I think this is going to be solved by Max. You have a documentation MR, right?
I do, and Lorena has just reviewed the actual documentation bits of it, and that will include sort of like a small introduction to the product analytics work, which I intend on being sort of bulked out considerably. But the main purpose of that MR is to add the initial dashboard and visualization schemas to the code base and link to them so folks know where they are.
Yeah, so that Axel's work should be adding that link to the admin settings and also updating that documentation that Max has been working on to include details about what's in the admin settings, so that should probably go back to ready for development or in development, one of the two. I don't know where Axel is on that.
And possibly even block it based on my one being complete first.
Yeah, it sounds like we actually need like two different issues, but I'll move it to in dev since it's in flight, and I'm sure Axel can pick this up once the documentation has been merged. The next in development one first in the queue is mine. That's Cube, rendering a line chart with Cube. This is something that I've been busy with today. Hopefully now that my other issue that I have here is the separation of dashboards and widgets into separate files is in review with Axel. I can get my branch ready to be merged because this issue is based off this issue, if that makes sense. Because we're building new infrastructure, I'm using this change on that. Sorry, my brain, words hard. It's difficult.
Makes sense.
Max, you have the next one also for defined version 1 of a user schema. I think this is
kind of what we just talked about. So yeah, I think we're agreed on it at this point. So I think we can close that once the MR that adds the schema to the documentation has been merged. I'm not expecting it to be sort of a final version one, but while we're in alpha, we can break things as we see fit without having to worry about version numbers. But it would be good to get something merged, so at least we can iterate from that point. And we can make assumptions based on the current state of the schema, which is kind of what I'm doing already. So I'm hoping once I've addressed all the comments from Lorena and anyone else who wants to input on it, then we can close that out hopefully this week.
So next up in review, we have one from Axel, which is adding a loading state. I reviewed this, I think Rob as well. I'm not aware of any other updates on this. Quickly just going to check. It seems like there has been some changes, but yeah, this is just to add a loading screen or add a loading state to the dashboard initialization. Then Rob, Max, sorry, you have retrieved projects dashboards via GraphQL.
You get my face and Rob's mixed up. How rude.
You're both British.
Yeah, but he's Brummy. It's completely different.
We're a different
I'm just
breed.
glad I'm not the only one that's mistaken the two.
Every one-to-one, Max. Every one-to-one, he calls me Max.
That's not true. Not
Really?
every one-to-one.
I think as well, I think you've made the same mistake as me, that our avatars on GitLab are both pictures from our wedding. Yeah, because
It's
the
literally
only
the only
nice
picture I have.
Yeah,
I don't take
same.
pictures.
Same. Okay.
It's not every one-on-one. Anyway, sorry. Continue, Max.
So this is like half done now. So there was two MRs. The first one is now merged and in production behind feature flags, obviously, where you can use GraphQL to pull out basic information about a dashboard, namely just the name, description, and I think a list of widgets. The second MR that's just gone into maintainer review, thank you, Jan, for looking at that, adds the rest of the information about the dashboard. So you'll be able to use GraphQL to query dashboards, widgets, visualizations, and all of the data within or a subset of that information, depending on how much you want. Pretty happy with it. Seems to work pretty well. So hopefully the maintainer won't hold it up too much. So that should be merged this week and we can close that issue off.
Awesome. And yeah, we've already talked about this one, and I've also covered this. In verification, I see Axel has moved Cube API proxy feature to EE. I'm not sure if anyone has any updates on that.
I think it's done.
Yeah, we should be able to close.
Yeah, we made a mistake. The first time I didn't review it properly and we caused a broken master, so it was reverted and Axel tried again. And as far as I'm aware, it hasn't caused another production issue, so we're fine.
Cool, then we can move on to closed issues. See, we have a bookmark. So what's new is this one from Rob.
Yeah, that is reverting the Cube.js implementation, our proxy back to post, although Tim has messaged earlier today regarding some issues he's having with that, with his work that he's doing to do with query building through a UI. So I'm currently reviewing and looking at that to try and figure out what's going on, if it's an issue with post or if it's just, you know, what's happening. So to be continued.
Okay, cool. I'll also keep an eye on that because I think I'm working over a branch that doesn't have this change included yet. So I might also run into
Don't rebase.
Yeah, I should. Then does anyone know about Axel's MR2 or issue to move Cube API proxy? Oh, no, this is the one that I literally just covered it. Yeah,
you're good.
It's
cool.
Super not exciting.
Let me just add
I
that.
validated it myself as I rebuilt my GDK for the 50th time.
Right. In that case, Sam, you have the next item. I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, so I just wanted to spend a few minutes after our conversations last week. It looks like we have some confusion around since we're using the term MVC, internal preview release, customer release in a few different places. So I wanted to just make sure we're all on the same page in terms of where we're trying to go to, what are some of those milestones, and what are we doing to break those milestones down. And as part of that, the first way I'd like us to think about this is we're doing two major efforts to culminate in two different releases. So we are working towards what I'm calling our internal preview release. This is primarily targeted just at internal GitLab users, GitLab team members, essentially only dog fooding just for us, no customers. After that, the next big milestone release is going to be our first customer facing release. That's where we're actually going to be going to external users and saying, hey, you have a GitLab free, premium, ultimate, whatever subscription. We would like you to use this in your real world applications. Notably, each of those types of release have a different epic associated with them. I've linked them both in the document. The customer facing one, I think we're well away from, so the requirements are still in flux there, but the internal preview one, I feel pretty good about what our scope of requirements is for this. So I'd like to briefly review that, and then we can talk about how that gets broken down into what we're calling various MVCs and iteration plans. And this is linked in the document if you want to follow along at home as well. But really the requirements for the internal preview are these four here. One, we're going to need a repository that has our development environment so that we can actually build and work on this project. Two, we need to deploy this to a production quality environment and add that instrumentation to the internal handbook. That's how we're going to be actually doing the dog fooding so that we have a real world application that's not GitLab.com to get around some of the data issues we talked about a few months ago. Thirdly, and this is the one I think where we have some confusion around, is we need to be able to provide pre-configured dashboards of some sort out of the box. And the reason for this is that we want users who are going to be internal GitLab users, but ultimately will be customers one day, to be able to very quickly go from I clicked the button to turn it on to I'm immediately getting some sort of insight result. I'm getting some sort of value out of product analytics quickly. If we ask users, even internal users, to go through a set of steps and go through a checklist to add customizable dashboards, that's going to introduce friction. It's going to slow down adoption. Potentially they'll drop off. And finally, we need to communicate that plan so people know how it's going to affect them and what we're doing. On this piece about hard-coded dashboards and hard-coded visualizations, I realize this is a little bit confusing since we're also working on customizable dashboards and widgets in parallel. When we originally set up these requirements, we thought it was going to be more complicated to actually do the customizable schema-driven dashboards, which is why we descoped down to just this hard-coded set of dashboards. It turned out it was actually easier to just do the customizable dashboards rather than hard coding, which is why we went forward with that. That said, those customizable dashboards, that's really something that's going to be blocking for what we ship to external customers for when we want them to work. But this need for something pre-configured for the internal preview is still there, because customizability is addressing a pain point around I need to be able to see what matters to me, whereas the fact that we have dashboards that are pre-configured and hard-coded addresses the pain point around it takes me a long time to get started before I get value. So those are similar points, but they're slightly different pain points that they're addressing. So I've talked a lot. I would encourage you also to review the child epics under here. We can make iteration plans that bubble up to get us to where these end requirements ultimately are for the internal preview. But wanted to know, did that help clarify things? What other questions do you have? Because I want to make sure we're all aligned on where we're going with all of this.
So first of all, thank you for explaining that. I would say that the list of issues that we have under the epics, I often find really hard to follow, especially because a lot of them were created way before we had even like before I joined the team, and then half the team had joined the team essentially. And a lot of them are now out of date or aren't following what we've just discussed around how we started moving ahead faster with the customizable stuff than we actually planned. So there's a lot of issues in there which just don't align or make any sense to me. So I more or less ignore them and just go with what I'm being told by Dennis or you, Sam, on a weekly basis on what I should be focusing on. So there might, I'd love to see those sort of combed through and just made sure they are up to date. They probably are now. I've just got an assumption in my head.
So yeah, I just wanted to interrupt quickly. If you or anyone encounter an issue where you don't think it's aligned or out of date, then please raise it in the issue. That way, you know, Sam and I are spending sessions to go through everything and then make sure everything's up to date. But if there's something specifically that doesn't make sense, because, and something I wanted to bring up in the red show as well, is that I've seen us close old issues because we're like, oh, that's really out of date, and we've moved on past that. But if we're supposed to be keeping issues as single sources of truth and we end up actually replacing those old issues with new ones, then we should actually just be going back and updating those. Or again, if they don't make sense, like ask Sam, Tim, or I, you know, what we mean by that, or it's like, you know, severely out of date because it's, you know, building blocks for dashboards and that doesn't really mean a whole lot, then we can go in and clarify that. But that's just a really long way of saying, like, if there's something that confuses you or this issue, or if the epic itself doesn't make sense, then that means that Sam, I, or anyone else can help to kind of iterate and make sure it makes more of a cohesive sense. Yeah.
There's one thing now that I think, again, thank you, Sam. One thing that we're missing, so we sort of made that jump to add the ability for customizable dashboards, but I'm aware that we don't want to necessarily make that ability widely known or accessible for an internal preview, which is fine. We will need to, based on that schema that we've got now, make it possible that folks can create our predefined dashboards automatically. That the UX flow for that might be something along the lines of an MR that we can create for a project automatically that allows them to add that dashboard, or we can add stuff in it to just hard code it and not have to worry about the code end of it at all. I'm open to how we do that, but I don't think we have an answer to that yet.
No, we don't.
On that piece, I think that's one of the things we can dig into as part of the UX weekly meeting that we'll have for what that looks like. We definitely don't need to hold back any of the work that we're doing in terms of customizable dashboard, especially because this is internal. We can iterate very quickly here with a really low level of shame, because we're not asking anyone to pay us money for this. This is something we are going to be using ourselves only. And so that comes with a lot more opportunity to iterate maybe more quickly than we would for external things.
I think that's fair. I think as well, I think I can see an external customer setting up the stack and then being presented with a bunch of options. What is this application for? If it's e-commerce, right, well, then here's a bunch of dashboards. We'll create you an MR with a bunch of dashboards. That's probably a step too far than what we need now. Oh, look, Dennis has beat me to it. Suggesting that we manually hard code.
Exactly. So, I mean, if we're thinking internal preview, we don't need to worry about the fancy like onboarding flow, which is important when we get to external. But for the purposes of internal handbook, for example, we know what the dashboard is going to look like. We have access to the repo. We're already going to make a merge request to instrument it. Just add another one to add that .GitLab file for all the schemas so that we have these pre-built dashboards to start.
So actually, we don't. Right now, we don't need to do anything. If we can continue along the path that I'm on currently with the backend stuff. And we can decide what dashboards we wanted to find for the internal preview to find that in an MR in the right. Cool, fine.
Yep. Think even leaner MVCs. Put on your startup hat.
The most boring of boring solutions is what we like.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
From an engineering strategic standpoint, how I see this to some extent, you move forward with building these dashboard schemas, the dashboard formats, building one after the other visualization for it so that we have different types of charts. And to some extent, Sam, Dennis, and I are simply going to build YAML files with one dashboard after the other and building those. That's why I'm also looking currently into the query builder to give us already the opportunity to build very fast, very quickly some queries. And you simply keep pushing so that we can have more features on those dashboards. And what they will simply be, the ones that we provide beforehand, is that they are read-only. And hopefully then at a later point, and a point quite soon, we will also have basically, you can also add more of those because when I use Postdoc, and I'm more than happy to set up a demo so that you can also have some insights how they solve it. Is like, they are like, collect data, you collect data, and then they're like 2 dashboards, and you feel like, okay, that was for it. And then they say like, you can build dashboards now to figure out from which country the people are coming. And I'm like, why haven't you built this for me? This was done in the 90s before for counting pixels. And I think that's a little bit the topic here. And we maybe simply look into, okay, we build very easy PowerPoint charts and say, okay, check. Those are the charts that we want to build and have on the page. And the main part is really getting the schema ready, having visualizations for it. As soon as we have this, we can go and crunch out YAML files for different dashboards.
Great. Well, then, for what it's worth, I think at least from the backend point of view, we're nearly there.
And as a starting point for what those dashboards will look like, I would encourage you also to look at the screenshots we took from the proof of concept around both the audience and the behavior. Until we come up with something new or decide to change this, we'll use those 4 items as our starting point of where we want to get to, unless we find some other things that we want to do instead for those dashboards. But let's use those as this is where we're shooting for V1 right now.
And I'll create issues for those, because understandably those aren't, defined as separate units of work, and were included just as screenshots and summed up as we should provide something based off the vision proof of concept. So I'll further build that out today, so that we can all review and make sure that that's well defined. But just to reiterate on Sam's point, highly recommend checking out the rest of the epics. For example, like customizability. When we initially talked about it, we just said, it started as a wouldn't it be good or great if we did X. We've gone in there and we've also defined that specifically of what's going to be what we intend to be exposed to the customer in terms of how much they can customize from the UI, but also ultimately giving them the control to define it in their repo, and not actually turning into this whole editor of dashboard where you can edit the queries in line or something like that, at least for now. So definitely check out all of the epics inside the internal preview and the issues.
My quick 2 cents that I would like to add is thanks, Sam, for going through this. I found it really helpful to first off get an overview of what we want to do and a refresh on that, and also an acknowledgement of where we are and how that does and potentially can affect our steps going forward. And also it helps me to have that mental split between or create a divide between our very first MVC and the MVC after that, which is customer facing, and also that we're starting to use different terminology around that, because when I initially joined, I did kind of meld the two in my head into one MVC. So yeah, this was super helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, glad to hear it. And for everyone, I mean, if you ever have questions about this type of stuff, please ping me, because if you're curious about it, probably someone else in the group is as well. So we should definitely talk about it to make sure we're all on the same page, working towards the same goals.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I definitely have got very confused myself regarding where we are in terms of schemas, and whether we're using schemas or using what Tim started out doing with putting visualizations into our repo directly, and how that was going to mesh. So knowing that we can just hard code a bunch of YAML files into the internal handbook for now, using this schema that we've jumped ahead on, is great. And I think, yeah, on top of that, I want to say it's just to really congratulate everyone on how far we've actually come, considering we didn't all the things like customizable schema structure, and how long that we've, when I first joined, how little we had a proof of concept that was definitely nowhere near ready for production use in any way, and how far we've come since then to actually have a fleshed out medium to long-term solution that can get us at least a few milestones down the line before we have to start deviating or making it any more complicated than it already is. It's a really big achievement for the team, I think.
I mean, we all started with nothing, so it's great to see how far we've come already. So. Cool. I think the next point, I've already announced this on Slack, so I'll just cover it briefly since we're running low on time. The user script's been updated, and now will auto update by default. If you're using TamperMonkey, it will check for updates once a day. It's now pointed to the new cluster, and so we've already been receiving data, but if you haven't already, you do need to manually update one more time to make sure that you have the download URL or update URL parameters in the header. That way it will check for updates going forward. Other than that, yeah, we should hopefully not have any more cluster migrations to have to do, at least temporarily. In the next milestone, I'll be looking at how we can automate getting that data set available, so people always have a fresh set of data to work with. We've already been receiving more events, so it's good to see that we've restored event collection there. I will provide these updates later. I would love to see some show and tell, so I can prepare an async update for hiring and infrastructure.
Cool. I'll quickly share my screen just so that this also shows up on the recording. Yeah, I would also really like for us to get into this habit more often of, you know, sharing our victories. And like Rob said, like we've come a long way. And even in the short time that I've been in this team, it's very cool to see the progress. So what I would like to share is something I've done is I've updated our dev kit README with updated instructions. When I joined, it was a bit stale and also wasn't like up to like the latest changes. So please have a read through. And I'm sure I made a mistake here or there. I try to replicate this as much as possible, but I guess also we'll see how accurate this is once new team members join, and they'll be able to follow these steps.
I've used it. It works.
Okay, great. Awesome. Yep. Thanks for the feedback.
Yeah.
The next thing that I would like to point out as a win is nothing of my own work. It's purely Rob's hard work, and that is the onboarding designs that he's created.
You've been my rubber duck. Don't lie.
Yeah, but I mean, that's just me sitting on a call while you're shouting at Figma. But yeah, Rob's done a great job of creating these onboarding screens that I'm quickly flicking through here. There's a lot of thought that like goes into everything. Sam has also provided some very good feedback and guidance on like, you know, what is appropriate and what we should and shouldn't have. And yeah, for someone who isn't a designer, I think this is like really fantastic. Rob shaking his head, but I disagree with your disagreeal.
It's great work.
I'm gonna speak this one also for Max. Sorry that it's just like a podcast with Hyun here. This one, since Max just left the call, this is something that I, as a front-end consumer of this, find like a very good piece of work. This is what we've just talked about, like how we've leapfrog ahead in customization. This is Max's MR that adds support for repository configuration files inside GitLab, both for dashboards and for visualizations. It means that we now basically, with this MR, support fully customizable dashboards. It follows the schema. You can import multiple visualizations. You can share visualizations across multiple dashboards. And because it's just repository files, we have all the supporting tools around that via like the blob editor and the web IDE to create, manage, delete these files, put them in an MR. So this gives us a great jumping off point to, you know, create some templates, add it in here. And yeah, there's so much that we can do now, and also so little that we actually have to build ourselves because we're just utilizing these standard repository tools. Yeah, that's
huge.
I think it.
Well, I think I'll definitely jump in and try to build parts of the audience and behavior dashboards using this. This looks great.
Cool. Well, in that case, I think we're at the end of the agenda, unless anyone has anything else they would like to add.
Tim, do you want to call anything out with the query designer?
Yeah.
Yeah, happy to do so if you still have time. I have just had a one-on-one with a Sam, so we can go over time.
I'm good to go over.
Good. So let me share my screen. So I was looking a little bit at something that we investigated very early in the prototype, and I was discussing this also last week with Sam. How do we get at some point to basically build those dashboards, and what are things people look at, and looking at competitors and what they will show? And even now it might make already sense to give everyone a better and clearer picture of what we want to do, and what may be some things that we are currently missing that we still need to build into the product to be able to accomplish some things that are shown in the query design, and what we are currently already able to do on those things. So this is a super early version just to figure out things at the moment. But I think we can bring some parts of it one-to-one in a sub-MR even to production, so that we would be able to already play around with data, and basically have at the end like a copy and copy paste part where we simply can take the query and put this into the YAML file, because this is producing already that query. And the head model is to, because right now, if you look at Cube, the only table that you have is Jitsu, which doesn't tell you anything. It's an event table with tons of events. But what we want to do is we want to separate already by different event types, and we want to separate by different click events and product areas and all those things. And I think giving this not to the user will make it very hard for them to understand, and we will end up with a solution. Okay, this is a query builder that is super powerful, but not really usable, especially for the early stage of users. So the idea is to already break down here and build some abstraction into the product so that the user can come in and say, hey, I want to measure page views. I want to measure feature usage. I want to measure click events. And on the other hand, maybe users and daily active users and weekly and so on, all those user metrics rather than event metrics. And this is something where we definitely need to take a look at both building sessions so that we have a session table that is already extracting and summarizing some of the events into, okay, that was a user session, because based on that, we can then build also more insights into users. So something that is currently possible straight away would be all the user activity. For everything else, we definitely need to take a look so that it's feasible on the long run. It would be through queries, but it becomes super harsh very early on.
We don't have anything for sessions today, correct? Like that's
exactly,
not a thing we're tracking. Okay.
Yeah, we will need to do some aggregation and based on like the anonymous user ID to track that.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
we've not structured Cube's schema at all yet. We've not gone through that and actually made it production ready.
There's definitely some dependency issues that'll be set up for the dashboarding.
Yeah. And this is, by the way, is using in the background View Cube Query Designer already. So this is providing me through the endpoint and that's why I needed to edit apart from the load endpoint, also a meta endpoint and a dry run endpoint. And this gives me already the data on what is possible by Cube itself. And I simply abstracted some of the things to say, okay, I want to have page views counted. I want to have this for all pages, and the idea is to have then say, okay, I want to have insights just on a very specific page. So this would be also a possibility because we can get a distinct from the Cube backend. And if we say all the pages, then we say, okay, that's our data source, our general data source. And we can go in, do we want to have rather page views over time, basically by day? So then we get the counts based on the different days that we have data in. By the way, this is the test data that Dennis has provided. Or you can also say, hey, I want to slice the data up by URLs so that you get basically the URLs. They are so long that you get the counts down here and so on. So you can also say, I want to have them sliced up by the page title. No, that's the page doc path in reality. But you can have, what else do we have? We have user type, I think I set already up now. Language. Yeah, language, that's the user language that is currently set. So that is most probably me, Germany, or anyone
not
else.
just you.
So there you go. But you can also have the slicing based on operating systems. So everyone is currently using internal handbook from a Mac and so on. And this is then basically the next step. And a step further down the line, we can also say, hey, do you want to slice up the data by 2 elements so that you have basically 2 dimensions that you can say, okay, what are the most used pages for each user language, for example? And that's how you can build. And the idea is right now I have simply added another data component, which I call data table, which just lists the data to make it easier here. But here, the next point would be, okay, we add the line chart that Jan is currently working on, then hopefully a stacked bar chart and so on. But provide already way more direction through our query designer compared what Cube is providing with this massive feature set. But basically abstracting even on another layer anything that we do with Jitsu and the data structure there so that we have also browsers and so on, because in reality this would be one field that is called parsed UA OS or browser version, for example. So that is something that I think we can definitely make much easier for the user. And here, the idea is to have simply a button where you can say, okay, I want to see the query. You get it as a JSON or as a YAML. You take it and you copy it for now into a YAML object. But at a later stage, I hope, as soon as we have a real dashboard configurator, you can say, I want to add a new widget, and we build basically here the widget query with the data visualization in here. So this would be basically the starting point for it. But yeah.
Well, because what I really like about this is the fact that you don't have to make a code change to see a change in what the data because my thinking is that we're going to see a lot of drop off if it's hard to do data exploration, right? If you have to manually edit a YAML file, make a commit to try something new, people aren't going to do that. They'll use a visual interface like this. I think it looks really good, Tim.
Yeah,
That's great.
So this is definitely also 100% for data exploration already here. And yeah, I think the big next step will be defining for our product intelligence for some tasks that we get pre-aggregated sessions, and with pre-aggregated sessions we can do all the classic user daily active, weekly, monthly, and so on, and can take it from there. But everything events related, one-to-one, we can already build into the product. So that's currently my
don't we
main
have
target.
Don't we have timestamp values in our data currently? Because we should be able to build DAO and MAO off of that, right?
Yes, in reality, yes, we should be. That is DAO and MAO we can incorporate even without sessions, because we have a unique user ID, we have the timestamps, and we just need some more complex. It would be a
distinct anonymous user ID over your time frame.
Yeah, because I put that together in Google Sheets. I'll drop a link to it if you want to check it out. Using the doc host as well as that timestamp field and the source IP. Yeah,
so that's XMAOs or DAOs are possible. It's sessions that will have to require pre-aggregation. But yeah, no, that's exciting stuff. Well, I imagine we'll have to get into event taxonomy and pseudonymization for that. But yeah, there's a lot of potential there.
Good. Yeah.
Nice.
Thanks for sharing, Tim. And we can put all those huge blocks together, and I think that's the most interesting part at the moment, is really that we are very close with a couple of those things. And as soon as we have everything in place, we can start with YAML, but also take another look that we work closely together with Optimize, because looking at their needs at the moment, just to come back one more time to the where are we going, is really that we can maybe really take a look how hard it would be to create then all those custom dashboards and change them over time, because that's the main feature that they will need. What they are looking for is a dashboard where they have these Sora and Dora and whatever Nemo fish metrics exactly. But what they want to have is like an executive dashboard, as they call it, so that you can basically say, okay, I want to have the statistics once for project X, I want to have the statistics once for project Y and once for project Z. So that is nothing that could help them really without having some sort of a dashboard edit. And it simply has a huge wow effect that we can present and use this from there. So cool. Yeah, no, it's super exciting. So we need to get those docked, and then we are moving forward, I think, in a much nicer pace of getting stuff shipped.
Cool. This was a great demo.
Questions?
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, then if there's nothing else, then wish everyone a good rest of your Tuesday, rest of your week, and don't forget Friday's Family and Friends Day.
All right, thanks, folks.
Take care, everyone. Bye.